Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're traveling back in time to 1920s Wales.
1920s Wales.
You unpack a pair of chilling murders that really just shook the small town of Abertalery.
Absolutely. These cases, you'll hear about seances, conflicting alibis, and a shocking confession.
Really left an entire community grappling with the truth, with what even happened.
You know, what makes these cases so compelling beyond their tragic nature is how they illustrate the challenges of investigation in a time before modern forensics.
So we're talking before DNA evidence.
Yeah, really before even widespread fingerprint analysis.
We'll see how public opinion, social dynamics, and even the limitations of the legal system played a role.
All came into play. It's fascinating.
Let's start with the first case. The tragic death of 8-year-old Frida Burnell in 1921.
Yeah.
What do we know about the circumstances surrounding her disappearance?
Well, Frida vanished on what seems like an ordinary day.
Just normal day.
February 5th. It was a Saturday.
Okay.
She was sent by her father to run a simple errand.
A simple errand.
To Mortimer's store, a local shop. She was seen talking to the shop boy, a 15-year-old named Harold Jones, shortly before she disappeared.
And that seemingly mundane detail, that interaction with Harold Jones, would become a central point in the investigation.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
But before we delve into that, I think it's crucial to understand the social dynamics of Abertalery at the time. This was a tight-knit community, you know.
Everyone knows everyone.
Everyone knows everyone, a place where everyone knew each other.
Mhm.
The idea that a child could be abducted and murdered in their midst was almost unthinkable.
Unimaginable.
Yeah,
Which makes the discovery of Frida's body the next day all the more shocking.
indeed. Her body was found just a short distance from her home,
Oh, wow.
hidden in a sack. She'd been brutally murdered, suffered a blow to the head,
Oh, gosh.
and strangulation. And there were signs indicating a possible sexual assault.
A horrific crime that, as you can imagine, sent shockwaves through the community. So
Yeah.
how did the investigation unfold from there?
Well, the police, including detectives from Scotland Yard,
Scotland Yard. So we're talking big time.
yeah, which at the time was really the top tier of criminal investigation in Britain,
Oh, wow.
were brought in. They began piecing together the timeline of Frida's last known movements.
Trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah, and that's when suspicion began to fall on Harold Jones.
Now, you mentioned earlier that this was a time before modern forensic techniques.
Right.
So what led them to focus on Harold? What kind of evidence did they have?
The evidence was largely circumstantial. Remember, this was a time when forensic science was in its infancy.
So brand new,
Yeah, DNA analysis didn't exist,
right?
and fingerprinting was still a relatively new technique.
So what were the specific circumstances that pointed to Harold?
Yeah,
This feels important for really grasping the complexities of the case.
you're right, it is. A key piece of the puzzle was the location where the murder is believed to have taken place.
Okay.
The store's shed. Harold, as the shop boy, had a key to this shed,
So he had access.
giving him access to the potential crime scene.
And what about the physical evidence found at the scene? What did that tell investigators?
There were some items found, like corn chaff, a bloody axe that seemed to link the shed to the crime,
Okay.
but the connection wasn't definitive. You know, it wasn't like finding fingerprints or DNA that directly tied Harold to the murder.
So investigators had a possible suspect, but not the kind of irrefutable evidence we might expect in a modern investigation.
Right.
That had to make things incredibly challenging.
It did. And here's where things take a turn into the truly fascinating. While the police were pursuing their investigation, some members of the Abertalery community turned to something quite unconventional.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
A seance.
A seance. You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
They really tried to contact Frida's spirit for clues.
They did. And remember, this was a time when spiritualism was quite popular, even among some in law enforcement. It wasn't seen as outlandish as it might be today.
Right.
People genuinely believed they could communicate with the dead and perhaps glean insights into the crime.
So what happened at this seance?
Yeah.
Did they get any leads from the other side?
Well, according to the participants, Frida's spirit did indeed speak, offering a description of her killer.
Okay.
And get this, the description matched a mysterious stranger who had been seen lurking near the alleyway where Frida's body was found.
Wait, so we have a potential eyewitness account of a stranger near the crime scene?
Mhm.
And this account is seemingly corroborated by a seance.
Right.
This is where the line between fact and folklore starts to get really blurry, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And this is precisely why this case is so compelling. It forces us to consider the limitations of eyewitness testimony, the influence of public opinion, and the ways in which belief systems can shape our understanding of events.
So we have a community grappling with the unthinkable. A police investigation focused on a young boy with a circumstantial connection to the crime, and a seance that throws a mysterious stranger into the mix. Where do we go from here?
Well, the police have to sift through all of this, trying to determine what's credible evidence and what might be misdirection or even wishful thinking.
Right.
And keep in mind that the townspeople were fiercely protective of Harold.
Right.
Many refused to believe he could be capable of such a crime,
Interesting.
creating a wall of public sentiment that the police had to navigate.
So with a mix of circumstantial evidence and a community divided, the case heads to trial. What was the focus of the prosecution's case against Harold Jones?
The trial largely hinged on Harold's alibi, the timeline of events leading up to Frida's disappearance and his access to the shed. The prosecution tried to establish that Harold had both the opportunity and the means to commit the murder,
Right.
but they lacked that definitive piece of evidence that would seal his fate.
And what about Harold's defense? How did they counter the prosecution's claims?
The defense focused on highlighting the lack of direct evidence linking Harold to the crime.
Okay.
They argued that the circumstantial evidence was flimsy
Okay.
and that the eyewitness accounts of the mysterious stranger were more credible.
Okay.
They painted Harold as a victim of circumstance, a young boy caught in the crosshairs of a tragic event.
So we have a classic courtroom drama unfolding,
Yeah.
a divided community,
Yeah.
a suspect with a shaky alibi, and a lack of concrete evidence. What was the jury's verdict?
After days of deliberation, the jury returned with the verdict, not guilty, and the town just erupted in celebration.
Wow.
For them, justice had been served, Harold was innocent, and the real culprit was still out there, likely that mysterious stranger.
Okay.
But this feeling of relief, of closure, was very short-lived.
Because just 5 months later, another young girl vanishes from Abertillery. This time, it's 11-year-old Florence Little, a friend of Harold's younger sister.
Right.
What can you tell us about Florence's disappearance?
Well, Florence was last seen with Harold's younger sister,
Okay.
which immediately raised alarm bells given what had happened to Frida.
Makes sense.
A search was launched, and this time the discovery was swift, but even more horrifying.
I've been reading through the sources you sent, and I have to admit, this part is incredibly difficult to process. Florence's body was found in the attic of Harold Jones's own home. How does a community even begin to make sense of that?
It was a devastating blow.
Yeah.
A complete shattering of the trust they had placed in Harold. And unlike Frida's case, this time the evidence was undeniable.
Right. This wasn't just about opportunity or a shaky alibi. The sources describe physical evidence directly linking Harold to Florence's murder. We're talking blood stains, a bloody knife found at the scene. This wasn't circumstantial. It was damning.
Exactly. The discovery of Florence's body and the accompanying physical evidence, it shifted the narrative completely. It silenced those who had so vehemently defended Harold during Frida's trial. They were confronted with the horrific reality that the boy they had believed in was capable of taking a life.
It's hard to imagine the collective sense of betrayal and grief that must have washed over Abertillery. Faced with this overwhelming evidence, how did Harold respond?
He confessed.
Wow.
He provided a detailed written statement admitting to the murder of Florence Little.
It's a chilling thought that someone so young could commit such a brutal act and then recount it in writing. This confession must have been a turning point in the investigation, right?
It absolutely was. It shifted the focus from speculation and circumstantial evidence to the stark reality of Harold's actions. But it also raised a whole new set of questions. Why confess after being acquitted in a previous murder trial?
Right.
What was going on in Harold's mind?
And those questions become even more urgent when you consider what Harold did next. He confessed to Frida's murder as well.
He did.
He admitted to luring her to the shed, carrying out the murder, and then meticulously crafting a false alibi to cover his tracks.
It was a shocking revelation that forced the town to confront a truly disturbing truth. The boy they had rallied around, the one they believed was a victim of circumstance, was a calculated killer who had deceived them all.
This raises so many questions about Harold's motives.
Mm-hmm.
Why commit these horrific acts? Why confess after seemingly getting away with murder?
There are several theories explored in the sources. One is that Harold craved notoriety.
Okay.
He enjoyed the attention, the whispers, the sense of power that came with deceiving an entire community.
Wow.
Perhaps the acquittal in Frida's case fueled his desire for more of that dark attention.
Another theory I found particularly unsettling is the possibility that Harold was a budding psychopath, someone who lacked empathy and derived pleasure from inflicting pain. There were also mentions of a demon that Harold claimed commanded him to kill, adding a supernatural element to his already disturbing psyche.
It's a complex and unsettling puzzle.
He really is.
How much can we truly understand the mind of a killer, especially one so young?
Right.
Was it a thirst for notoriety, a lack of empathy,
Or
or
both.
was there some other deeper darkness driving him?
We know that Harold was sentenced to an indefinite detention period for the murders. He ended up serving 20 years before being released on parole in 1941.
Right.
He adopted a new identity, became Harry Stevens, and seemingly built a normal life.
Yeah.
Marrying, having a child. It's a shocking twist, knowing that this man capable of such brutality was allowed to re-enter society and blend in.
It does raise significant questions about rehabilitation, the capacity for change, and the risks associated with releasing someone with such a dark past back into the world.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder what the authorities saw in Harold that led them to believe he was no longer a threat.
And it's especially unnerving considering what one of the officials involved in Harold's release said about him.
Yeah.
He believed that Harold would one day be the father of happy children.
Oh, wow.
That's a chilling statement given the horrifying acts Harold had committed. How could someone responsible for the deaths of two young girls be seen as capable of such normalcy?
It speaks to the limitations of our understanding of criminal behavior,
Yeah.
even among those tasked with making decisions about parole and rehabilitation. Did they genuinely believe Harold was reformed, or was there pressure to release him to close the chapter on a dark period in Abbott-Tallery's history?
It's a reminder that sometimes, even with a confession and a conviction, true justice remains elusive. There are always unanswered questions, lingering doubts, and a sense that the full story may never be known. But the story of Harold Jones, or Harry Stevens as he became known, doesn't end with his release. The sources you provided suggest a possible connection to another series of unsolved murders, this time in London.
Right. The Hammersmith nude murders.
The Hammersmith nude murders, a string of killings that terrorized London in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah.
What makes these murders particularly chilling is the brutality involved and the way the victims were found,
Right.
often in a state of undress, which led to the nickname Jack the Stripper.
Right.
What's the possible connection to Harold Jones?
There are a number of unsettling parallels. The Hammersmith victims, like Frida and Florence, were often petite women.
Okay.
The cause of death in many cases was strangulation.
Hmm.
And several of the victims were missing teeth or dentures,
Oh, wow.
which is reminiscent of Harold's habit of collecting women's handkerchiefs.
It's as though certain patterns are repeating themselves.
Yeah.
Dark echoes of the Abbott-Tallery murders. Are there any geographical links between Harold and the Hammersmith murders? Did he live or work near where the crimes took place?
That's where things get even more intriguing. Harold, or Harry Stevens as he was known at the time, lived and worked within a very close radius of where some of the Hammersmith victims were last seen. He also had access to an industrial area where several of the bodies were discovered.
So we have a possible motive. This pattern of behavior that seems to link back to the Abbott-Tallery murders.
Right.
And we have a geographical link, placing Harold near the Hammersmith crime scenes. It's a lot of coincidences to dismiss. Did Scotland Yard ever investigate Harold as a possible suspect in these murders?
What's remarkable is that at the time, Scotland Yard was completely unaware that Harold Jones, living under his new identity, was right there in London during the Hammersmith murders. This is before the days of widespread computer databases and rapid information sharing. You know, it highlights how challenging it was to track individuals and connect potential crimes across different jurisdictions.
It's a chilling reminder that even in a major city like London, a killer could potentially blend in and continue their crimes undetected. And what's even more eerie is that the Hammersmith murders abruptly stopped in 1965,
Oh, wow.
the same year that Harold turned 59. Some speculate that his declining health, due to a cancer diagnosis, may have prevented him from continuing his crimes.
It's a haunting possibility, one that adds another layer of complexity to this already dark tale. While we may never know for sure if Harold was responsible for the Hammersmith murders, the potential connection forces us to confront the nature of evil, the question of rehabilitation, and the enduring mystery that often surrounds serial killers.
These cases raise so many profound questions about the human capacity for both good and evil. Here we have a man who committed horrific acts as a teenager, served his sentence, and was released back into society. Did he truly reform? Or did he carry the darkness within him, leading to more victims in London?
And it's not just about Harold himself. These cases challenge us to think critically about the information we encounter, about how we form judgments, and about the limitations of our justice system. How much can we rely on eyewitness accounts, especially when influenced by fear or grief? How do we balance the need for punishment with the possibility of rehabilitation? And what do we do with the lingering uncertainty, the unanswered questions that inevitably remain in cases like this?
The Abbott-Tallary murders are a stark reminder that sometimes the most unsettling mysteries are those that hit closest to home.
Yeah.
They shatter our sense of security, forcing us to confront the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. And they leave us grappling with the enduring power of the unknown, the questions that linger long after the headlines fade and the investigations end.
It's those lingering questions, that insatiable curiosity that drive us to delve deeper, to search for answers, and to make sense of the complexities of the human experience, even in its darkest moments. What stands out to you about these cases? What questions are you left with?